Ready? I am Bishop Tavis, T-A-V-I-S, Grant, G-R-A-N-T, the Acting National Executive Director of the Rainbow Push Coalition. We have now Congressman Jonathan Luther Jackson, 1st Congressional District of Illinois.
It is with my honor and privilege of having been the former national spokesperson for the Rainbow Push Coalition to carry on that tremendous tradition of fighting for equal justice under the law. We've made tremendous gains, and I'd like to now introduce my father, the chairman of Rainbow Push Coalition, to bring on our new president, Reverend Jackson.
Good morning, everybody. Let me express my thanks to you for your being here today. I want to express my thanks to Reverend Al Sharpton, really in the tradition of our struggle. His mother brought me, he's 13 years old, and he has carried on the banner of that struggle. As the world he chose to go into mass media, to try to get him to be the field director of the Rainbow Push Coalition. And then, likewise, Jonathan Jackson became our spokesman, national spokesman for the Rainbow Coalition. Frederick Haynes, able preacher and leader of our country, been seriously involved in our struggle. We now seek to move on to deal with the box the Supreme Court has put us in. The Supreme Court has threatened 60 years of work. Like in 1896, they moved us backwards. Attack on affirmative action, up to years of negative action. They have sought to access to education, the affordability of education. They've also weakened the Voting Rights Act, making it states' rights again. So we come into that season, look over the pages of my own life and history, that I can no longer do what I want to see it. I want to pivot to a new platform. I want to teach university seminaries and teach young ministers how to fight for social justice, home, and peace in the world. We're very involved with Rainbow Push as we work on programmatic thrust for our work. I do want to say I'm delighted that we went through a process. Our board surveyed the field. The only man capable of doing this work is my teacher in so many ways, Reverend Frederick Haynes. Teacher, preacher, is working on his PhD. Reverend Haynes, take it. You're our new president.
I am humbled and honored to receive this opportunity to stand on the shoulders of Reverend Jesse Jackson. Reverend Jesse Jackson has achieved appropriately the status of being an icon, a living legend, and as a consequence, because of his heroic life, well over 50 years leading the Rainbow Push Coalition, beginning with its roots in Breadbasket, really receiving the baton from the drum major for justice, Martin Luther King Jr., and through his activism, because history will record, even though he received the baton from Dr. King, he was already a part of the movement, an integral part of the movement, having sat in at a lunch counter in 1961. And so Jesse Jackson has been for us and continues to be for us a North Star for freedom and justice. And I rush to say Jesse Jackson, a North Star for freedom and justice, has not been limited to the shores of this country. During this Rainbow Push Convention, he has been honored by Costa Rica. He's been honored by France. He has received the highest awards of several countries, that recognize that he has taken his freedom fighting not only seriously in America, but he has used that commitment, that passion for justice with his sharp mind, his warm heart, his strong spirit to make a difference around the world. I stand here on the shoulders of one who has literally changed the world. You cannot write the history of the world without speaking of the contributions of the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. And so when I say I'm standing on his shoulders, it's because I have too much sense to stand in his shoes. The shoes are much too large, and yet because of where those shoes have taken us, I'm able to stand on his shoulders. And how desperately we need now what Rainbow Push has done and continues to do. I'm indebted to the board. The leadership of the board has been absolutely amazing in their support of Reverend Jackson, but also in setting the stage for this time of pivoting. Reverend Jackson has always been a wordsmith. I find it appropriate that as hip-hop is celebrating its 50th anniversary, one aspect of hip-hop, of course, is language. Before hip-hop Jesse Jackson was already saying, we ain't settling for charity, we want parity. That's a bar right there. Jesse Jackson is hip-hop. And so I think it's appropriate that in terms of language, he says that he is pivoting. And one of my good friends, Todd Yeary, says it's appropriate that he pivots because he is so pivotal, even right now. And so we stand on his shoulders. I thank the board for presiding over the pivot. I also want to give a special shout out to Reverend Jeanette Wilson, who is a long time leader in Rainbow Push. Her work remains significant. She's a wonderful friend, powerful sister, and I want to salute her before all of us. I also want to say thank you to Bishop Tavis Grant for his dynamic leadership and presiding over this time of pivot. He's done a sterling job, and for that we are grateful. Congressman Jonathan Jackson makes all of us proud, and every time we see him taking his activism to Congress, speaking up for us, again, we know that not only is the first district in good hands, but this nation is in good hands under his leadership. I want to say a special thank you, as I've already mentioned the board, but John Graves is standing here. John Graves has given amazing leadership to our CEF board, one of the great transformative boards for economic justice and advocacy. And so I want to thank him. I quickly say, as I conclude my remarks, that the mission and vision of Rainbow Push is needed in 2023 as much as it was needed in 1973. Sadly, the Supreme Court has declared war on justice and freedom with the recent decisions. And as Reverend Jackson has already said, the Supreme Court, therefore, has given us an agenda. I also quote Reverend Jackson by saying that we will continue as Rainbow Push to not only have an offense because of an agenda that advances where the nation needs to go, but at the same time, we will have a defense protecting the rights that we have fought so hard to gain so that we can maintain them. The good news is that under Reverend Jesse Jackson, we have a rich history. The good news is that because he is pivoting and we all are standing on his shoulders, the future is going to be very fruitful. And so I thank you, Reverend Jesse Jackson, for teaching me. I have on my resume schools I've attended. I'm going to go ahead and add on my resume that I am a thank you, Lottie graduate of Jesse Jackson University, because I'm standing on his shoulders. Yeah, thank you.
You mentioned that the Supreme Court has given Rainbow Push an agenda. What do you see as the priorities? We know the mission, but how do we sync the mission and what's going on in this world right now with what you do next?
Well, again, as Reverend Jackson has intimated, they gutted affirmative action. We will have an action in response that will be affirmative. And our affirmative action will and we had a wonderful board meeting yesterday, and one of the things we discussed was the fact that this man has registered more voters, especially during his historic campaigns of 84 and 88, than anyone in the history of this country. So we're going to pick up that baton, and in the spirit of 84 and 88, we're going to register voters, but we're also going to register voters with an agenda. And the agenda will basically be that we recognize the importance of the courts, and so we have to have a ground game of registering, educating voters, mobilizing voters to the polls, and as we do all of that, we will begin to have a long game so that what President Biden appropriately labeled a court that's not normal, that we help to push the court back to being a normal court. And so I say that gingerly at this time, but the ground game will be to pick up where Reverend left off, a massive voter registration campaign. Well, we've had a wonderful conversation about the fact that Chicago and Rainbow Push have a rich history, and we're not going to break that up. Chicago will be the headquarters of Rainbow Push. I want to be real clear about that. If American Airlines can have a headquarters in one city and hubs in other cities, we need hubs in Texas, because I think everyone knows that we have a governor who is doing everything he can to attack diversity, equity, and inclusion. We need a hub in Texas. And so I can remain in Texas, but at the same time be in relationship with the headquarters. And of course, COVID taught us that you can do things on camera, and the airlines still work between Chicago and Dallas. And so we will be here, but we're going to have hubs, not only in Dallas, Detroit, New York, Atlanta, Silicon Valley, through our satellite operations. So please know, Chicago is the place. For me, it's especially the place in the summer. Thank you. Good to meet you.
You mentioned standing on the shoulders of Reverend Jackson. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you've learned from Reverend as you've kind of been preparing to take on this role and how it'll carry into your role as president.
Wow. Okay. So if you want to be here for a few years, we can do that. But the Cliff Notes version is Reverend Jackson has talked about in his pivot teaching preachers how to fight. I begin with that. He literally has taught me how to fight for social justice. He's taught me how to fight by dramatizing the plight of persons who are victimized by injustice. Reverend Jesse Jackson, whenever there's been a quote-unquote emergency, a racial justice, social justice, political, economic justice emergency, he shows up. When he shows up, he lends his moral authority through his presence. And that brings about healing for those who have been victimized, but it also brings about a challenge to the perpetrators of injustice. And so he's taught me to fight by showing up. He's taught me to fight by dramatizing those situations that are not good. And so the fight is what he's taught me the most. He's also taught me the importance of casting a vision and not being content with what things are, but showing what things ought to be. And so I could go on, but the bottom line, I've got to say this. He's also taught me that my faith works when I wed justice to faith. There is no way to be serious about your faith if it's limited to the confines of the sanctuary on Sunday morning. He's given me a brand new hermeneutic, a way of looking at Scripture, not from the top down through the eyes of the empire, but instead from the bottom up, through the eyes of those on the margins. And so that bottom-up approach to Scripture is also my bottom-up approach to doing ministry, because that's how we change the world. That's how we make the world a better place, not from the top down, but from the bottom up. We have Jonathan Jackson, who shows us that you can work from the bottom up, get to the top, and still have that bottom-up consciousness and commitment. And that's a Jesse Jackson University concept. Wow, that's hard for me to answer. I'd have to go with whatever they thought about. Yeah, what'd you think about me, Doc? Yeah, that'd be good, because I don't know.
Let me say that Reverend Frederick Haynes is in the circles vow, evangelizing to save souls and to redeem America. He's the top preacher in that category. He speaks with authority, a sense of compassion, and the maturity of a leader when I must face the press every day. And so I want to express my thanks to him for his qualities of leadership. I also want to say this to you, Brother Freddie. You have made a commitment to preach a whole gospel.
Yeah.
Not just personal salvation, but social justice. A different kind of strategy involving social justice. And the Rainbow is a multiracial, multicultural, multilingual organization. We're not going to limit our gospel to one race.
Right.
It's no time for nationalism of any sort. Some of the Rainbow. You were in New York and Chicago and LA as mayors ever since of the Rainbow. That's what happens. Thank you.
Right. Right. Well, thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for the great work that you do there at WVON. I simply say that, and you said the world, and I can't help but begin with the fact that the world is on fire because of climate change. And on top of that, on the front lines, victimized by climate change because of environmental injustice and environmental racism, are the most vulnerable communities. And those communities are usually poor, black, brown, indigenous. Without question, we have to be on the front lines to ensure that people can drink unleaded water and afford leaded gas while pushing for a clean economy, a clean environment. We have to do that. At the same time, Reverend Jackson, and I'm going to keep referring to him because, again, I'm a graduate of that university, and Reverend Jackson has shown us the importance of economic justice. I never will forget attending the first Wall Street conference in New York, and he made this statement brilliantly comparing our freedom struggle to a symphony. And he spoke about the first movement as emancipation, the second movement as public accommodations, the third movement, voting rights, the fourth movement, which is going to be a long, hard struggle in a capitalistic country, is access to capital. And that fight is a long fight. I'll do a Jesse Jacksonism. We've attained civil rights, but not silver rights. And the fight for silver rights is a constant fight against greed, economic exploitation. It's the constant fight against those in power who exploit those who don't have power and enrich themselves in the process. And so a part of our vision will have to do with not only fighting to preserve the planet and making sure that we survive and can live on it, but ensure that at the same time, and this goes back to the roots of breadbasket, where we have bread on every table and access to resources, that we continue the fight for economic justice. I have to give a shout out because last night was absolutely powerful to our Push Excel program, which emphasizes what? Educational equity, educational justice. There is still in this country an inequitable way that we fund public education. There is an all-out war on the truth in this country now. But through programs like Push Excel, led by Reverend Wilson, we can push for truth in education. So in a real sense, Reverend Jackson has given us a foundation that is also going to serve as our blueprint. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.